All right, Woody, thank you. Kyle Krabs, host of Locked On Fins podcast and A to Z Sports NFL analyst, joins us this morning. And, there's not a day can go by that we don't somehow talk about quarterback. It's so important at every level. I just watched the East-West game, saw the Senior Bowl, talked to Charles Davis, who was at the Senior Bowl, and he says, not a great-looking quarterback class. How are you looking at this quarterback position, knowing the Dolphins are one of 5, 6, 7 teams looking for a quarterback? What's the best way in year one to at least Band-Aid this thing?
Yeah, they get a couple different options that they can go. I would agree with Charles that the assessment for if you're trying to get one in the draft, it's not a great year to need a quarterback. And there's a bunch of teams, including some in front of the Dolphins in the queue, who will have that opportunity to make that pick at quarterback. So I think the most telling thing is the examples that Sully gave when he had a he just sit down interview with Cam Wolf, and he talked about, he went to Seattle, and he talked about Seattle back in when John Schneider first got there, and they went Charlie Whitehurst, and they went Matt Flynn, and then they draft Russell Wilson, and that's the embodiment of what he's talking about, and where you're going to take swings of the bat, and it's not going to be we're going to draft the guy in the first round, and that's the guy for the next 6 years, no questions asked. And I just think this year it's do you take a lottery ticket on a young guy? Do you trade for somebody's backup who maybe is ready for a chance to start? Do you go for a guy that's a little bit more long in the tooth to try to get you a chance to compete while simultaneously looking at your other options long term for what should be a much better quarterback class in 27? And I recognize we say that about every college quarterback class, but I think it's true this year.
Okay.
So it's what's the most high upside, low opportunity cost decision that you can make, where you're not going to look back and be like, man, we really regret going for this guy, but it could have paid off for us, and maybe it does pay off for us.
If they like Malik Willis, because they know him better than anybody, we've been saying this. GM, the head coach, been there. Your head coach practiced against him. He was running scout team as you got your game plan, and he was a quarterback of every other team all year. So you can see when they said, hey, we need you to run more today, going, damn, he can run. And then he got a chance to play in a few games. Some people I've talked to really, really like him a lot. So if we do like him, he's going to want to get paid. He knows the situation he's in and going to have a chance to start maybe at a few different places. How high a price do you go on a guy like that, considering the cap hell we're in right now?
Yeah, well, I think the way that you can look at it is you can do anything in a short-term window, right? And what I think would work in Miami's favor with something like this is I think Malik would prefer to have a shorter-term contract to get a chance to get another bite at the quarterback contract apple by betting on himself and playing well while being the starter somewhere. So I don't think you're looking at grand sums of guaranteed money across multiple years. It's probably, I would guess he'd be more attracted to like a 2-year deal or a 1-year deal like Daniel Jones did in Indianapolis, where he took the 1-year deal, right? And Justin Fields took a 2-year deal. And I think those are, I would lean more towards an inflation-adjusted dollar amount relatively close to what Fields got last year, which was $20 million per. With the salary cap going up another $20 million, $22 million, maybe you're talking 22, 23. You start getting north of that, I think that's a pretty hard sell. Because at the end of the day, the skill set's really enticing, but he has 155 career pass attempts. I just have I got a really hard time picturing NFL teams offering $30 million to a player with that workload when that's what Sam Darnold was getting off the Pro Bowl with 35 touchdown passes and 4,000 yards.
Totally agree.
I just think that's not a 1-for-1. I understand it's scarce. I don't think it's going to go there. But if it does, I would be looking elsewhere because that gets into that cost-effective swing for an answer. And I don't think at that point it would be cost-effective.
The next one I'm going to ask you, I don't think it's going to happen, but I got to throw it out because I do know they have a good relationship. Nathaniel Hackett, the quarterback coach, and Aaron Rodgers' relationship and the Green Bay thing. And I don't think he'd come here because I think he wants to win in his last year if he comes back. seems to me he would go back to Pittsburgh and they'll get him more weapons to play with. What are your thoughts there?
I think when you get into names like Rodgers and even Kirk Cousins, that it loses a little bit of appeal for me, because at least with Malik Willis, you can look at it and say, well, he's 26, right? Like, if you hit, there's a long-term opportunity there that you don't get with those other guys. So I think that's where it kind of, for me, would be counterproductive to go with a veteran like that, because I understand, like, and Jeff Hafley said this in whatever number of interviews that he did. It's like, we're going to build this the right way, but we are going to try to be competitive right off the jump. We're not going to be content to purposefully lose games or anything like that. And I'm sure they'll be interested in what their best options are for long-term and short-term. But I don't think, them talking about this being something that's built for sustainable success, I don't see those short-term bridges being overly attractive options unless they're for like minimum salary, which you obviously would not get with Aaron Rodgers.
Kyle, I want to ask you this one. Just looking at Pro Football Focus, they were not very kind to our grades for our rookie class last year in a lot of positions. I think they're all coming back and hey, listen, we're going young. We're going, it's cheap. That first contract around. Which guys have the biggest upside for you going from year one to now year two?
I think probably Kenneth Grant's at the top of that list. And I think the Jeff Hafley defense, if it looks like what it's looked like in some other spots, people are looking for the splash plays, right? They were, well, where's the sacks? Where's the tackle for losses? This front, I would expect, is going to be a little bit more geared towards getting penetration in the backfield instead of stacking the point of attack, extending your hands, reading the block, diagnosing where the ball carrier's at, and then discarding the block. It's a lot more like we're going to create chaos and get hip to hip with blockers early and play on the plus side of the line of scrimmage. So I think Kenneth Grant, with the physical tools, with the size that he has, going into a scheme with Hafley that I think will be a little bit more focused on getting penetration in the backfield, I think he's the sky's the limit there. And I think he has a chance to alleviate some of those, I'll use air quotes here, questions that people have, because, he was not good the first month, 5-6 weeks of the season, but I thought he settled in really well after that. He ended up finishing top 3 in pressures and sacks and run stuffs for all rookie defensive tackles last year, and all that, and being in a role in which he's encouraged to be more disruptive.
How do you feel about Jordan Phillips, who also played a lot next to him? Yeah,
I think probably the alignment will look different. He spent a lot of time in the A-gaps, where I think if you're going to put him in a penetration style, it's he could do some one tech, but when you go with your odd front stuff and you go the interior down 3, I think you could kick him out to be a little bit more of a penetration player that plays in the B gap. So I think that role will look a little different. I'm not super concerned about, if he's going to now be one of those like sunk cost players that you lose altogether because he doesn't fit the scheme. And it couldn't help but notice when the Dolphins put out their behind the scenes for that introduction day for Jeff Hafley, Jordan Phillips was one of the guys that was there at the presser afterwards. And they caught Jeff Hafley on the mic and said, "Hey, I loved you when you came out. You played the game the right way." So that kind of caught my attention as a guy that, you might look at, oh, well, he was a nose here with what he was this past year for the Dolphins penetration scheme. Are we a little worried there? I think the usage and the alignment will probably just look a little different for him.
Hey, so they're putting this coaching staff together, and two of my favorite guys, I'm very open about it, Joe Barry and Austin Clark, were two guys who were treated me great last year, always had time in the morning or afternoon, or Madrid spent a little more time with Joe Barry. But I was a little surprised because he was a former defensive coordinator in Green Bay before Hafley came along, and he kept him. So to me, that tells you how good a coach he is and the job that he did. I don't know what their relationship was before, but did that surprise you at all?
A little bit, just because they had also hired – it's been reported that they hired Al Washington, who was on the Notre Dame staff, to come in and do linebackers for them as well. So now you've got Hafley that's going to be the play caller defensively. The new defensive coordinator is Sean Duggan, who last year did linebackers in Green Bay. And you hired somebody from Notre Dame to reportedly come in and coach the linebackers. And then on top of that, you're keeping Joe Barry, who was the linebackers coach last year. So that was the part of it that surprised me, not the fact that they had respect for Joe Barry and wanted to bring him back, because I agree with you. I think he does a great job as a positional coach. His tenure as the defensive coordinator in Green Bay didn't go particularly well, but he's got a great track record of working with linebackers and being in some kind of a role working within the front seven. So I'm curious what his role is going to end up being and how all of that shakes out. But, I mean, he helped get Jordan Brooks first team All-Pro last year, right? Like, he was the position coach that did that. And I got a great deal of respect for Joe Barry as well, and I was pumped they got Austin Clark back too.
Yeah, by the way, I am too. And Dotson and Brooks just together just put up stupid numbers at those inside linebacker positions last year, to your point. Hey, so you've been following all this stuff and I know a lot of the top guys didn't show up and took some time off after the playoffs, or some of them just know they're going to be top picks and aren't going to go to any bowl games. They're going to have their pro day, and that's going to be it. But I do want to ask you with that 11th pick, as we kind of look at this, it's not going to be a quarterback at 11. Even if we dance with the pick a little bit up or a little bit back, I'm just curious, what position you looking at considering what kind of talent we have in this draft?
Yeah, it's I think you've got a decent chance for a number of positions to be kind of that best player available. I would agree that quarterback's not going to be it, where like QB2 in this year's class is probably somebody that whether you think it's Ty Simpson from Alabama or somebody else, I think you're looking at first 8 picks of the second round, kind of like where Tyler Shuck went to the Saints last year out of Louisville. That's kind of like the range in which I think it's appropriate to kind of take that bet on a guy with 15 starts. But you could tell me it's a defensive end, like a pass rusher. You could tell me it's a corner.
Yeah.
You could tell me it's the non-premium positions on the defense, like Sonny Styles, linebacker out of Ohio State. You could tell me it's safety Caleb Downs if he slides to you. I think he's kind of a do-it-all safety that I wouldn't say he's Kyle Hamilton, but he's got some alignment versatility that you could do a lot of things with that I think Jeff Hafley would probably have a lot of fun with. You tell me it's an offensive lineman, whether that's Malioa from Miami, whether that's Ione, the guard from Penn State, is very, very clean prospect. I think he's got great appeal right off the jump in pass protection and has plenty of mass to go from point A to point B in the run game. I think it could be a wide receiver. Like you could literally go almost anything other than quarterback.
Yeah.
And depending on what happens in the first 10 picks, you could look at it and be like, well, I think that's probably the best player. You could tell me we take him and I'd be fine with it.
The only thing I would say, one position, and I heard the Senior Bowl, they were raving about a couple of the defensive tackles dominate. And I was like, hope we don't take one, because if we do, that tells me Phillips, Grant, and Biggers did not impress this new coaching staff if they do that. Would you agree? And be shocked if they took a defensive tackle, somebody inside?
I would be shocked, because probably the 2 best defensive tackle names that were down there in Mobile were Lee Hunter from Texas Tech and Caleb Banks from Florida. And Hunter was kind of like a late emergence this year and played with a bunch of studs on that Texas front, where like David Bailey's projected to be a top 10 pick and Romello Heights projected to be like a top 50, top 75 pick. So they have a lot of talent on that front. And then Caleb Banks, he only played in like 2 games this past year. He had an injury issue, always been very toolsy, but the actual production and putting it all together has kind of been the question mark there. I would be surprised if those guys went in the top 20, top 25. So I think you're probably pretty safe in that regard from where those guys are projected to where the Dolphins are at least currently picking.
Let's talk real quickly. Front office, the GM and his staff got to make a decision on Bradley Chubb and Minkah Fitzpatrick. You have a feeling either way, both coming off good years, really wanted to be here. I thought it helped them when they started to play better. Those guys are a big reason. And the way they kind of put this team, along with Jordan Brooks and some other guys, really their leadership. You expect them both back?
I don't expect them both back. And that for me comes down to, I think in order to get the salary cap situation right, I think they're going to have to cut some cash off the budget this year. And Minkah's owed 15.6, 15.8, whatever it is. And Bradley's owed like 20.23. You put those two guys together, you're talking over $35 million in cash. That not all of that would hit your salary cap this year either. That would be more cap that gets pushed into future years to fit it under the cap this year, but with what your cap situation is. None of that money for both of those guys is guaranteed. So that's, for me, can you trade one of them? Would you just move on from both and kind of take the full-on flush with the cash situation? Do you extend one and move on from the other? I think Minkah's got more long-term appeal than Bradley does. So I'd be very surprised if they were both back. I would not be surprised ultimately at the end of the day with the big picture conversations that they're having if neither of them were back too.
Wow. Kyle, it's a good way to good teaser here with a lot of time to still try to figure out the old quarterback position. Kyle, thank you so much, brother. Appreciate you coming on.
Great as always, Joe. Thanks.
Kyle Krabs, the host of Locked On Fins podcast and A to Z Sports NFL analyst, joining us here before we hit this 9 o'clock hour at Landing Men's Clinic.